Peace. This is Jamal Robinson, 720astrology.com. Briefly, I want to discuss the upcoming big event, which is Super Bowl 58, which will be on February 11th, 2024. And that's a Sunday, of course. Now, I'm sure some of you who watch my channel may not have a care in the world when it comes to football, but this conversation is not going to be really about football. It's going to be centered around the significance of this annual grand event that is called the Super Bowl. And we're going to look at it from an astrological and metaphysical perspective, because I think this Super Bowl is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, ever. And I'll do my best to explain why. So I ask you just to bear with me, be patient, and to take time to consider what I'm going to present. All right. So this Super Bowl is brought to you by the number 13. Super Bowl 58 is brought to you by the number 13. Just like when I was a little boy and I would watch Sesame Street and say Sesame Street is brought to you by the letter A and the number 6, whatever. This Super Bowl is brought to you by the number 13, and in several ways. First of all, it is Super Bowl 58. 5 and 8 is 13. One of the contenders is the 49ers. 4 and 9 is 13. The starting quarterback for the 49ers, Brock Purdy, wears number 13. The star tight end for the 49ers is George Kittles. He wears number 85. 8 and 5, 13. The Super Bowl will be on February 11th. That's 2/11. 2 plus 11, 13. Taylor Swift is a key part of this Super Bowl because she's entangled with the star tight end for the Chiefs, Travis Kelce. And it's well noted that 13 is her lucky number. She's born on the 13th. By the way, she's a Sagittarius. She's born on the 13th. She turned 13 on Friday, the 13th. Her first album went gold in 13 weeks. Supposedly, the first song had a 13-second intro. And just last night, she won her 13th Grammy. So this whole thing of 13 is just all over this Super Bowl. Now, is it just coincidence? Maybe it is. But if you have a metaphysically thinking mind, then 9 times out of 10, you're not going to think this is just coincidence, as in just happenstance. All right. So where do we go from here? First, let's recognize from a metaphysical standpoint, and I'm going to go to the whiteboard here. From a metaphysical standpoint, the number 13 has great significance. All right. First of all, there are in the Bible, it's well known, there are 12 disciples. There are 12 tribes of Jacob in the Old Testament. Well, let's go with the New Testament representation with the 12 disciples. If there are 12 disciples, then what would it make the Christ figure in the story? The Christ figure would be the 13th. All right. Now, if you go back and look at the video I posted on the number 111, I did this whole breakdown on 111. When I talk about the number 1 singularly, I point out that the number 1, the word for 1 in Hebrew is echid. All right. Now, in Hebrew letters, this would be an aleph, a ket, and a dalet. Now, the aleph has a value of 1, ket value of 8, dalet value of 4, which adds up to 13. So 13 embodies an idea of unity. Okay. Now, the number 13 applies to much more, though, because there are other words that have a value of 13. And one of them that we're going to focus on is this one. It is Behu. Okay. That's a bet, value of 2, a Hey, value of 5, a Va, value of 6. 6, 5, and 11, 11 and 2, 13. But what does Behu mean? Behu means avoid. It means chaos. So here we have duality represented within the number 13. This also gives us a clue that there is duality even in the Christ figure. And I touched on this. If you go back and look at the video I did on Mercury and the Trickster energy, I broke down in here and I referenced this book, which is the Lost Books of the Bible and the Forgotten Books of Eden. And I showed in there how they show the other side of the Christ figure in this book. They show a side that is ruthless, a side that is impatient, that will snap and exact revenge at the drop of a dime. So it would give clue then that this Christ figure that we've come to see as just holy and good and innocent possesses both sides of the spectrum, duality. Well, we see that the way the Christ figure is positioned contextually with the disciples, that it coincides with 13 because it would be the 13th piece. And even if we want to argue that it would be the first, well, 13 still ties back to the number 1 because Echid is the Hebrew word for 1. So 13 embodies unity and what would be the antithesis to unity, which would be chaos. Now, on the 4th, when Taylor Swift won her 13th Grammy, she happens to be dressed in black and white. And that color combination metaphysically ties back to duality. Example is the yin and yang symbol. We've got a white and black and white. It's duality. Okay. Christ, going further, the term Christ has a lot of etymological significance. And etymology means origin. When we look at the etymology, we're looking at the origin of things or the origin of words. And I'm just going to do a brief representation of the Christ etymology. From an Indo-European standpoint, the word Christ means scratch, to scratch. So when we scratch, it gives us the ability to penetrate one layer and to get to something beneath. All right. Well, let's look at the etymology of the word scratch to keep digging even deeper. So scratch comes from this root family, which is Gerbh, the gerb, and it means carve. Also, it goes back to scratch, which lets us know that scratch is a pretty ancient concept as far as linguistically. Carve, incise. These are talking about cutting or making some type of, the word incision. When we make an incision, it's to cut. So scratching deals with carving, cutting. But guess what else emerges from this same family? The word gramma, which means letter, which coincides with writing. Now, where did Taylor Swift, where was she rewarded or awarded her 13th trophy? It was at the Grammys. Now, Grammy is supposed to be for gramophone, as in, I guess, a record player. But how is a record made? The sound is scratched into the surface. So here's part of the magic here. It's writing. This is why Christ coincides with the word logos, as in the word. In the beginning was the word. So if there is some type of potential ritual, and just to demystify that word, ritual just means arrangement. Brushing your teeth is a ritual or an arrangement. Breaking fast is an arrangement. Taking a shower or a bath is all the things you do, your habits, they are rituals, they are arrangements. So let's just imagine that the Super Bowl, super large bowl, a bowl or a pot that we put ingredients in. And those ingredients, we concoct a magical potion or a dish, food. We're making something. spices, different herbs, and other ingredients, some water, and maybe some, what is it? Some type of stock, vegetable stock, beef stock, chicken stock, whatever. And we get things boiling and they start melding together and become something. We are cooking. We're cooking. It's a form of alchemy when we add these things to the pot or the bowl. So what if the Super Bowl is a great culinary, we'll call it that, a culinary experience. And the ingredients are the players, the coaches, definitely the media, the fans in the stadium are key ingredients. The fans who watch at home are key ingredients. And many of those fans in the stadium and at home will be consuming food in a gluttonous manner that will give them a dopamine rush, and they will be drinking spirits or alcohol and will put them in momentarily altered states of consciousness. And that consciousness through their energetic direction, which we call attention, will be fed into the bowl. And maybe we have this entertainer who is dressed in black and white, representing duality, and who also is portrayed as a Christ figure with all the 13, 13, 13. And then this figure is attached to a player on the opposing team, the Chiefs. And what might the Chiefs represent? That's another discussion. And the opposing quarterback wears number 13. What if it's time, and I'm just going to do this part for the football heads. What if it's time for Purdy to become the Christ figure in the NFL, the new Tom Brady? And maybe this is a transference of power and extraction of energy from the current so-called king and the crown being handed to the new king, the new Christ figure, Purdy, who wears 13. Now, that's just on the one level. That's just for at the sports level. But again, as I said, I'm sure that many people who watch this, there's a chance, could care less about the Super Bowl or may not even be into football. So let's keep going and see what else symbolically may be percolating. Going back to the words I broke down, Ekid and Behu. Okay. This one means unity or one. This one means chaos. There's a Latin phrase that popped up in my head. Order ab chaos, order out of chaos. Another one that popped up and I can't spell it off the top of my head, but it's on the dollar bill, the $1 bill. E pluribus unum. I think it's on there. But it's from many come one. I think both apply here. Order ab chaos and from many come one. We could say the many is chaos and the one is the unity. The order, this is a very obvious one. The order here, chaos there. I'm wondering about this Super Bowl, and I'm wondering about if there is an arrangement being made that goes beyond the football. Let's see. So now I want to find the chart for the Super Bowl. It's on my other computer, so I'm going to cast it on this one. 11th, 5 p.m. Vegas. Bam. So here's the chart for 5:30 p.m. That's a mistake. So here's the chart for the Super Bowl. It's February 11th, 2024, 5:30 p.m., Las Vegas, Nevada. And I want to point out some key aspects. There are some hard aspects here at the time of this, at the start of the Super Bowl. First one I want to point out is Mercury has two hard aspects. Mercury here is here at 10 of Aquarius. It's still receiving influence from Pluto because it's separating, but it's still within a 10-degree range. But more importantly, Mercury is in a square to Jupiter, and it's in a semi-square to Neptune. I want to talk about those. For one, Mercury deals with communication. Mercury deals with commerce. Mercury deals with commuting. But I'm wondering about communication because this is a broadcast event. So I'm wondering if there's something communicated or this game, this grand arrangement opens the door for something that is communicated after the game. Mercury squaring Jupiter can be exaggeration, something exaggerated, something overestimated, things blown out of proportion. And then Mercury in a semi square to Neptune, for one, can be deception. It can be confusion. It can be some type of, it could be something that deals with some type of illusion. So is something not real, but presented as though it is? And is something blown out of proportion and exaggerated? Things to consider and think about with this grand event. In addition to that, we'll have Mars, which is at the anaretic degree. Mars already is a planet of action. And 29 is a very active, it's an action oriented degree. It's imminent change. And then Mars is basically conjunct Pluto. 2 days after the Super Bowl, it'll be directly conjunct Pluto. So this is a lot of heavy, dark, intense energy here with Pluto in contact with Mars. In addition to that, Mars is semi-square Hygeia. So we got a semi-square between Mars and Hygeia. Now, Hygeia is an asteroid that deals with the prevention of illness, sickness, and illness. So Hygeia could be correlated to the immune system. Is there some type of encroachment upon the immune system? Is there a message that goes out that incites a hormonal response, that incites fear, that brings out the animal nature? And the animal nature brings out, raises cortisol levels. It causes an increase in adrenal output. Now, cortisol and adrenaline are great if you're out there on the football field in the game. That's why you can take a hit in the game and you might have actually damaged something, but your adrenaline is pumping so high, cortisol levels are so high, you might not feel it. Then after the game, you're in the locker room taking the tape off, and it's like, oh man, did I break my finger? And it's on my foot. But what about the people? The people, we live our lives with our adrenal glands just being pushed. Just like running your AC unit at full power, nonstop, cortisol levels elevated, and it causes inflammation. It causes the body to attack itself. So I'm looking at these aspects and I'm wondering and hoping that there's nothing that comes about that would have the intent of producing this type of outcome. But it is something that gives me a feeling of caution. To add to the mix, the sun at 22 of Aquarius will still be in a square to Uranus at 19 of Taurus. So we got a lot going on. I got a lot of red lines. I know. Go back and rewind the video and it all makes sense. So this can be something sudden. This can be a surprise. This can be a disruption, interruption, with the sun in a square to Uranus. Hopefully this is not some type of tower moment. And here's the last hard aspect. That day we'll have Venus at 24 of Capricorn being received by Saturn, but also in a semi-square to Saturn. So Venus and Saturn here have a hard aspect. This can be some type of restriction, barriers, enforcement type of energy. What's interesting is that the square between Uranus and the sun has direct relationship to the semi-square between Saturn and Venus, because Uranus is received by Venus and the sun traditionally is received by Saturn. And even from a modern astrological perspective, the sun is received by Uranus. So there's a lot of eruptive volcanic type of energy here on this day. And beyond the football aspect, I'm wondering if the lead up with Taylor Swift and her affinity for the number 13, and just the fact that it just so happens that these 13 seem to be around her and situations are just set up, and she pops on the scene right here leading up to this Super Bowl. It makes me wonder if something is afoot. Some other things to keep in mind is that today, the 5th, time of me recording, Mercury is conjunct Pluto the 13th. Mars will conjunct Pluto at 0 of Aquarius on the 17th. Venus will conjunct Pluto at 0 of Aquarius. So this February is heavy, energetic month. And none of us knows exactly how this plays out, but we do know that there's a lot of intensity. I can feel it in the air already. We lay out all this stuff. What's the purpose of it? Is it just for intellectual masturbation and just for entertainment? No. It is to serve as a means of caution, but not to be hamstrung by fear. When we know an ice storm is coming, we don't go run in the corner of our house and ball up and just say, "Oh, I'm just going to put my head down until it passes over and hope nothing happens." No, what you do is you go out and get you some ice melt. If you want to be really proactive, you get you some chains to put on your tires. You make sure that you've got all your outside faucets covered, like for your water hoses and things. You take precautionary steps. I think the precautionary step for not just this Super Bowl, but 2024. The Super Bowl is opening a portal. The number 13 reduces to 4. 4 is the number associated with a portal, a doorway. Dalet, the fourth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, represents a door. When you magnify that or multiply it by 10, we have 40, which is mem, which is water, which is the womb. The womb is a doorway. We magnify that again, we have the ta, which is 400. It's the closing of the door or the closing of a chapter so that you can start anew. Either way, 4 is a number of transition. So this Super Bowl to me has a lot of energy around transition and alchemy and energy being moved through and transformed so that it can continue to exist. So, a lot of times, the greatest ritual for the common man and woman is to be aware. To be aware, because being aware gives you the ability to protect your psyche, your energetic field, and to not be grabbed. These aspects that I've shown, there are a lot of hard aspects on the day of this event, at the time that this event starts. And these aspects, which represent angles between different archetypal expressions, can come in and grab us. And part of the reason of knowing or looking down the road, getting a forecast or looking at what's coming is to better prepare oneself to be in the driver's seat and not be a helpless passenger. We see that could be the potential for some message being exaggerated, things blown out of proportion. We see there's a chance for deception. We see there's something involving potentially health, wellness, and the ability to maintain it. So this is a great time to be locking in on those aspects, on fortifying your temple inwardly and outwardly. Meditation, prayer, cleansing activities, internally and externally. So exercise, food intake, water intake, simple things that we can pay attention to fortify the temple, because possibly there may be invaders looking to come and loot the temple and to extract the riches. So one of the reasons that we look down the road is so we can better protect and preserve the riches which have been bestowed upon us. And the greatest wealth we have is the breath, because this is the animating principle to the whole show. So everything comes back to maintaining and strengthening our breath, which coincides with the fire. And metaphysically, this is what Christ really is. It's the fire that is within. And possibly there will be a concerted effort and escalation of attempts to extract this fire from the human. So the counter, if this is the case, is for you and I to be cognizant of what doorways we choose to open and move through, and to not be involuntarily moved through a doorway by something outside of us. There are several other things I could touch on with this Super Bowl, the 49ers, what they represent, the Chiefs, what they represent, the fact that Hygeia was discovered around the time that the so-called 49ers were active as far as moving out west to take land. But that's for another time. For the sake of our conversation here today, as it applies to this grand event coming up, but more so to the year and the future, period. Those who have the ability to expand and grow and upgrade their circuitry move into the new paradigm. And those who refuse to do what's necessary to upgrade their circuitry, they get fried. And we're seeing people now who are showing the results of fried circuitry. Just doing all types of crazy things because the motherboard cannot accept the electromagnetic forces that are imbuing the hardware. And so the hardware is burning up. Be mindful of how precious you are as a sentient being and do everything possible to protect and further your evolution. For private readings, including the 2024 forecast, I'm available through my website, 720astrology.com. Know the stars to know yourself. Peace.